What was something shocking to you about how that show was being made at that time?
I mean, it's the same thing that is shocking today is that they do it so quickly. You know, we open in the movie with a real quote from Lauren, which is, the show doesn't go on because it's ready. The show goes on because it's 11:30.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Honestly, I'm at the Toronto Film Festival, and that's my favorite time of the year.
Gotta be. You must have a special place in your heart for that festival.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, one of my first short films played here 25 years ago in front of a feature film called Chopper, and that was really exciting. That was my first taste of what a Toronto audience is like. And then a few years later, I brought Thank You for Smoking, and then I really got a sense of what it's like when it gets electric here.
How does it compare to other film festivals around the world?
It's a different energy audience-wise. I think this is the truth of it. And every film festival has a different language to it. The audiences are different. Some are more celebrity-based. I mean, Toronto definitely has a kind of a glitz and glam to it. Mm-hmm. And there's this kind of knowledge that, oh, this is the road to the Oscars. So everyone shows up in their best clothes, and you feel that. You feel the red carpet of it all. But what's most important to me is that the audiences in Toronto they come ready to cheer, they come ready to laugh, they come ready to cry. They want the gift that you've brought them.
Talk to me a little bit about Saturday Night Live. Talk to me about you and Saturday Night Live. Like, as a kid, were you watching it? Were you staying in on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time my father said, no, they do this every Saturday.
What do you mean?
Well, because in my head, I thought this must be a one-time thing. It's like the Super Bowl, or the Oscars. It happens once a year, and I couldn't wrap my head around that. There's gonna be 90 minutes of live comedy every week. They're gonna write an entirely new episode next week, and then and then my story is the same as everyone else. It's you're just trying to stay awake till 11:30 at night.
Who was your cast?
Like the first cast that I really remember had like John Lovitz and Nora Dunn in it, but the cast that felt like my cast was the Will Ferrell cast.
Tina Fey, Will Ferrell.
Yeah, so I grew up in Los Angeles, and as soon as I got a driver's license, I was going to a place called the Groundlings, which is like Second City, but in LA, 99-seat theater, and Will Ferrell was part of the cast then. So I got to see him and Sherry O'Terry do the cheerleaders in a tiny theater in Los Angeles. And when they went to SNL, it was a bit like being a freshman in high school and like a senior went to the big show.
It's hard to imagine that those sketches were in small theater. Like, I remember talking to Bob Odenkirk one time.
Right.
And he did, I think he did Van Down by the River.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wrote it.
And Farley did it at Second City in Chicago.
Yeah. So it's easy to forget that there is a minor leagues for Saturday Night Live. Right. And the same way that people track players since they were like 15, 16 years old, you follow comedians too. And when that group went, it was a couple things. One, it felt like, okay, this is my year. But also there was a tenderness to that generation. Like Will Ferrell's sense of humor was not as nasty as like the 1970s Saturday Night Live.
It was silly. It was sweet.
I think of like Will Ferrell pretending to be like a 10-year-old child or crawling around on a boardroom table, acting like a cat.
Yeah.
Like it's all that stuff that was absurdist, but in a very sweet way.
You skip the minor leagues in terms of Saturday Night Live. You go right from road hockey to the NHL because you get brought in as a guest writer.
Yeah, although I would say that my road hockey was doing short films. Like I feel like all the time I spent with my many short films playing film festivals with lots of other filmmakers and wondering, okay, which one of us are going to get the chance? So I do feel like I did get that experience. But yes, I take what you're asking.
Yeah.
And I got to be a guest writer at Saturday Night Live right after Juno.
So right after Juno's exploding, you can kind of do anything you want.
Yeah.
And you reach out to Lauren, or?
Yeah, my agent called Lauren and said, look, he had two dreams as a kid. One was to be a film director and the other was to write here at SNL. And Lauren said, sure, he can come to Space Camp.
What? Tell me what you remember about your week on SNL.
I got a week there, and I got an office on the 17th floor, and I got to know a writer there named Simon Rich, who now is pretty famous. He's an
I just
author,
read his
comedian.
latest book.
He's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, he's brilliant. He also he still to this day looks like a child, and at the time looked like he was 12 years old. He came into my office, and he's like, "Hey, excited to be here?" And I thought it was like an intern. And I was like, "Yeah, what do you do?" And he's like, "I'm one of the writers." So I was like, "Oh, okay." But we stayed up all night on Tuesday to like 4 or 5 in the morning writing sketches. And on Wednesday, I got to hear my sketches read at the table read, and then got to have the experience that everyone does there every week where there's a moment in the afternoon where Lauren's office door opens, and the head writer comes out, pins a piece of paper to the wall, and it's like a high school play. That's the moment you find out whether you got in that weekend.
Oh, did your sketch get to air?
I got one sketch in. It was the weirdest thing I wrote. It was this thing, Death by Chocolate. It was a human chocolate bar who has a taste for murder and just kills random people.
Who was in it? Who was the star?
Ashton Kutcher was the host that week, and Jason Mantzoukas was in the sketch, and Andy Samberg was in the sketch. It was crazy.
So when does the idea, it's that week, right, that the idea dawns on you to make this film, that there needs to be a film about the making of Saturday Night Live?
Yeah, I mean, I was on the floor of 8H and listening to the countdown, and it was a level of adrenaline I've never felt in my life.
So you start to think, I'm going to make this into a movie?
Well, I'm thinking I want to capture this one day, and I just don't know how it's going to find its way. And simultaneously, over the years, I've really wanted to do a real-time movie. I'm a big fan of films like there's a German film called Victoria that's all told in real time, and I just think it's a masterpiece. And I like organized chaos. That's something that I was trying to explore in a movie I made called The Front Runner. I love movies from the early 70s in which you are just thrown into situations and you're not given proper introductions to characters. People are just coming at you. So all these different things are coming around, and then one day just hitting me and just went, oh, opening night.
I remember last time you were on, you told me that generally when you work on a film, you think about if you can get the ending going, then generally you can figure out how to make the rest of the film.
That's, A, you have a good memory, and B, that's it. Yeah. I feel like that's why we make movies. I think there's a confusion. I think people think you make a movie because you want to tell a story, but the story is there. It just serves a purpose, and the purpose is to make you feel something. In the same way that a song is meant to make you feel something. And I'm most interested in what is the thing the audience feels right before they walk out the door.
So with this one, it seems easy to me. It dawns on you that there's an ending built in that the show has to go to air. So the ending will be the show going to air.
Yeah, it's pure exhilaration, but it's also that moment that one generation rips TV out of the hands of another generation. It's the moment where people who are not getting along the whole movie finally coalesce. And in some ways, it's oddly like a sports movie where you have a team that doesn't get along, and then finally they learn how to get along, and they win.
So the research you did for this, I want to talk about that. You spoke to the cast at the time, the crew at the time.
Yeah, I interviewed Gil Kennan, and this is my writing partner. We interviewed every living person we could find that had anything to do with opening night. So that's not only Lorne Michaels and Dick Ebersol, but every living actor, every living writer, members of the crew, art department, people in Billy Preston's band, Howard Shore, Paul Schaefer, anyone we could find.
And I'd love to hear something because I think a lot of it's well known. Like, it was a wild and crazy night. People really didn't know what was going to happen. Garrett Morris didn't know whether he should be there or not.
Yeah.
Weekend Update changes. There's way too many sketches. Billy Crystal walks out. These are kind of stories that I knew. There's a lot in the film that I didn't know at all.
Yeah.
What were some of the more surprising things you learned?
I mean, the most surprising thing was that Lorne Michaels was originally going to host Weekend Update.
Right.
I'd never read that in any book. I'd never heard that before.
Right.
And when he told me that, I was like, really? And it made sense because, Lorne was a performer here in Toronto, and I think thought of himself as a performer, writer, producer, and it represented a really important moment where he had to say, okay, I'm not the performer anymore. Right. I'm going to be dad. I mean, here's the guy who created the kind of orphanage for wayward comedians for now 50 years. Yeah. And there was a moment where he had to say, okay, I can't just be one of the kids in the orphanage anymore.
What did you, as someone who is sat in charge of a lot of film sets, what was something shocking to you about how that show was being made at that time?
I mean, it's the same thing that is shocking today, is that they do it so quickly. We open in the movie with a real quote from Lorne, which is, the show doesn't go on because it's ready. The show goes on because it's 11:30.
Yeah.
And again, high school plays get more time to rehearse.
Right.
Yeah. Like summer camp talent shows have more time to prepare.
Yeah.
They do this where you write the sketch Tuesday, you table read Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you build a sketch from the ground up. I mean, they build the sets, they paint them, they make the costumes, they figure out the wigs, they rehearse them, get them ready for camera. Simultaneously, they put together two musical, the musical performances, which are done at an equally high level.
But I will also say at a high school talent show, not only do they get more time to rehearse, there's no one doing coke backstage. I mean, it depends on the high school you go to. There's no.
You didn't grow up in Los Angeles.
Yeah, fair enough. There are not as many people doing coke backstage.
Yeah, fair.
There's not fistfights breaking out in
Right.
the wardrobe room between two of the major star cast.
Yeah.
There's not Al Franken experimenting with blood, spraying it on Lorne Michaels. There's not
Right.
trying to Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm giving too much away here. Johnny Carson calling and wishing well, but really sort of praying for the show's.
You can't spoil this movie. I mean, that's kind of the fun of it.
Yeah.
It's a roller coaster. As you walk up to the roller coaster, you can see there's a loop, there's a corkscrew, there's a huge fall. It doesn't matter. It's going to be a roller coaster. You got to just buckle up.
But it's chaotic. It was chaotic getting
Yeah.
the show to air. I didn't know how chaotic it was.
It absolutely was. And look, again, we are taking weeks of people's memories and boiling them down into 90 minutes. So there are events that happened in the weeks before and weeks after, and we've boiled them down into one 90-minute experience because what we really want you to do is just feel what it was like to be there.
I'm not a filmmaker, and I want to ask you a filmmaker question, and that hopefully you can explain to me and the audience of non-filmmakers.
Oh my God, I'm about to fail miserably.
And you're being graded. There's a you don't know this about Canadian radio, but like in the Olympics, she got a bunch of numbers out there.
Yeah,
and
okay.
She's just going to hold them
All right,
up.
hit me. Okay, I'm ready.
When you were talking about this earlier, you said I've always wanted to make what would you call it, a single moment film, a
film that takes place in 90 consecutive minutes.
So what is, to me, this is where the non-filmmaker comes out. It was extremely long shots, just long shots of no breaks. To a non-filmmaker, dilettante neophyte, what's the most challenging part of shooting a movie like that?
I mean, it's a few things. That's the truth of it. One is choreography. You have to think of it like a dance movie almost, but it's a dance that has 80 background actors, another 50 lead actors, and there's a llama. I mean, it's just so many things have to be on a mark and hit, and it starts in the writing process where we're tracking every single character in this film and where they are in the building. We had like a True Detective murder board, of just like where everyone is and when, because anytime someone walks in a room, you have to know where every other character is at that moment.
Right.
And then when it comes to the choreography, it's how you make it feel alive. You start watching, if you have editing at your disposal, you can bring up the pace, bring down the pace, make things feel more exciting, less exciting, and you have the opportunity in post to really navigate how the scene is affecting somebody. If you're doing that all on set, you have to watch the shot on set and go, is there any single thing I do not like about the shot? Is there any moment where you go, yeah, my heart kind of slows down for a second and a half and I don't want to give my heart that opportunity. Right. So you're watching, we shot the whole film once with stand-ins. Then we started to rehearse with the real actors. Then we bring in the background actors. Then we put everyone in like full makeup, hair and wardrobe, and we do it again. The camera's doing it over and over again. The camera has to also rehearse like crazy.
Right, because it has to be pulled around. It has to.
Well, you have two operators, right? You have someone who operates the dolly, and we're using this tiny peewee dolly that can find its way through the hallways and through the doorways. And then there's a camera operator who's actually operating it from the other end of the building on a remote head. It's not a steady cam. Right. I think we have these ideas from watching like background on ER that it's always a steady cam. So
or the Goodfellas long.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is not that. We wanted more precision than that, and so we have an operator who is using a monitor and is using wheels to move the camera back and forth. And we wanted the audience to feel like you were literally walking down the hallway and your head is turning left, and your head is turning right, and you were just catching things, both visually and audibly.
But isn't that tremendous pressure on the actors? Because if they mess up, you've been shooting for 8 minutes in one take.
100%. And we had those takes where, you're minutes into a take and an actor goes, and they just like their face drops into their hands and everyone laughs and you go again. Right. But that was the joy of this movie was that we all knew what we were getting into. Yeah. And so then you're chasing it. And when someone hits the timing perfect and someone improvises a line and it's great, and the moving cart of lights just goes through right at the right moment, it almost hits somebody but it doesn't, and you get to the end, you call cut and everyone cheers, and that's exciting.
But what did you need to get right about Lorne when you were talking to Gabriel LaBelle, who plays him?
It's tricky, right? Because we all know Lorne now, and Lorne's very private. Lorne's kind of a cipher, and at the time, he's 29 years old. He's a guy with a vision, and he desperately wants it to come true. It's one of the reasons I cast someone so young. Gabe, I think, is 22 or something like that. Yeah. And I met Gabe at a screening of The Fabelmans, and he was standing next to Steven Spielberg, the greatest director of all time. And Gabe was 21 at the time, and he was completely holding court. And I was like, who is this young man? And I took him out for coffee the next morning, and his ability to just tell stories, his ability to say what excited him, he gave me Lorne vibes.
Really?
Yeah, there was just a confidence to him,
Right.
like a really young confidence. And he took it really seriously, and we had a really good time.
Didn't Lauren come to set or something? Did I hear that?
No. I mean, Lorne has zero interest in legacy.
Yeah.
Lorne has no rearview mirror. He's always looking out the windshield. All he thinks about is who's going to be on next Saturday.
So has he seen it? Has he?
No, I interviewed him a few times at the film. We continue to chat. He's been hearing how well it's playing at the film festivals. He sent me a really lovely note last week because a bunch of his friends had seen it. Sent me another note on how well it's done at the festival. So it's lovely, but he hasn't seen it yet.
Do you hope he does? Do you?
Oh, of course. But I can't imagine what it's like to have a film made about me. I hope I never do anything interesting enough where someone wants to make a movie about me, because that would be weird to watch.
You're right. That is strangely a good way to live your life. Live your life so that no one wants to make a film about you, even though generally we make our films about nice people or good people. Maybe.
I don't know. I wouldn't want to watch any moment of my life recreated.
I don't even want to live it now. I'll go out on this, and it's sort of a bigger question. I want to stay uncynical in a cynical industry,
Right.
and and public radio is not that cynical, so I don't find it that hard. Hollywood and filmmaking and studios, I bet it can be a relatively cynical industry when you get to that kind of money. When I was watching the movie, and I saw,
I don't think it's about the money though.
Tell me.
Well, I mean, I think you're saying it can become cynical when there's that much money on the line, and I think the big question is, why do you do what you do? And I even say this about Los Angeles, because I think a lot of people make fun of Los Angeles and they think it's a cynical town. And it's like, well, who are you hanging out with in Los Angeles? Where are you going? And why did you come to LA? And there's a lot of people who come to LA to be famous. And yeah, that's pretty cynical. And that's not probably the person I want to hang out with. But then there's a lot of people who come to Los Angeles because it's a place that for 100 years has been creating things and telling stories that are shown around the world.
Yeah.
And so I surround myself with people who live to make people laugh, live to tell stories, who live to, like, literally tell a story person to person just to get that moment where they go, ah. And so when I think about the cynicism, it's less about the money for me and it's more about why do you do what you do?
Watching this film reminded me that Lorne Michaels at one point looked at NBC in the face and said something along the lines of, I'm sure I'm not going to quote it verbatim, but like, we believe in this thing.
Yeah.
This is a revolution. We want to make something great. And it reminded me of the uncynical nature of great art.
Yeah. No generation wants to change. Every generation wants to keep things exactly as they are. And then it takes someone from the next generation to go, I'm sorry, buddy, but we're moving. And they rip it out of their hands. And, you feel it happen in, you have the Woodstock moment in music. And then in the early 70s cinema, you have, The Graduate, and you have Five Easy Pieces and Shampoo and Harold and Maude and all these films where they said, yeah, cinema's about to change. And in 1975, Lorne Michaels represented an entire generation and said, we're not going to do television the way it's been done. It's not going to be, vaudeville or radio.
But he didn't say, and it's going to get a 9.8 share. Like, he didn't say, and it's going to sell so much shampoo. That's what I mean,
No, but he did know that there was a generation of young people who felt unseen, and that people like John Belushi had never been on television before, and that he was going to put music on his show that had never been on television, and that he was going to hire a production designer who had never done TV before, who was going to lay bricks down instead of rolling linoleum, and he just made all sorts of crazy choices, and most importantly, represented a kind of humor that had never been seen before on TV, and took things out of, The Village and out of Second City, Toronto, and out of Chicago, and put it on network television.
It's an uncynical thing to do. And it's a beautiful story you told here.
He's a dreamer. I mean, like that's the truth. And I mean, that's the reason to make the movie, is we enjoy watching dreamers who are fearless.
Are you more of a dreamer now because you made this movie, or have your dreamerness stayed the same?
I think I've always been a dreamer, and I've always wanted to do things differently. And the thing that I really recognized in Lorne was, when you're a director, you have this idea in your head and you want to make this movie, and there's no way to articulate it until the movie's done. It's like a song. It's like, how do you describe a song until you just play it for somebody? And with a movie, of course, you're working with hundreds of people, and you have to convince people to give you money to make it. And none of them actually know what you're making. They think they're making the story, but the story is just, I don't know, the story is just the vehicle. What you want is to get people to feel something, and it's only once they actually sit in the theater and watch it and they go, oh, now I know what you're talking about.
Jason, thanks for coming in.
Come on, it is a pleasure.
Get out of here.